Chapter 8. The girls and Martha practically dragged her outside the building, but she wasn't sure why. Cindy was grateful for everything that Martha had done for her, but she still had no idea how she was going to get to the ball. The party had begun a while ago, and she was going to be extremely late. "I do appreciate the dress and everything, but the castle is quite far. There's no possible way I can walk such a long distance in these shoes," she said, sounding a little apprehensive. She wasn't used to people showering her with so much kindness, and felt a little uneasy that Martha had done so much to help her, a complete stranger. The girls from the brothel didn't care about her reputation in town, or the fact that she'd been involved with a highwayman. There was no judgment. They simply accepted her as she was, without question. "Don't worry, love. Everything is under control. I'm a changeling, not a human, remember? My magic's very powerful. I don't use it often, but tonight I want to see you arrive at the ball in style." Martha then brought 2 fingers to her mouth and whistled loudly. Cindy and the other girls looked as if they had no idea what Martha was planning. They were glancing around at each other, confusion clearly in their gaze. Several moments later, 2 beggars came running from around the corner. Cindy couldn't believe that 3 poor men had actually responded to Martha's whistle. They were filthy, toothless, and Cindy thought they must have been living on the streets for years. "Oi, you 3 stand there and try not to move for a bit. Both of you will go to sleep with full bellies tonight, and you may even find some gold in your pockets tomorrow morning," Martha said with a wink and a smile. The beggars looked at each other, shrugging their shoulders, and when Martha threw a huge piece of bread to each, they wolfed it down straight away. The poor men were starving. Before Cindy and the rest of the girls could figure out what was going to happen next, Martha began dancing around, releasing a stream of colourful magic from her fingertips. Warmth spread through Cindy's body, and she instantly felt happier, less worried about showing up at the ball. Martha must have been telling Cindy the truth the entire time, because in a matter of seconds, the 2 beggars changed into splendid, regal-looking white horses. Electricity danced across her skin, lifting the tiny hairs on her arms. There were gasps and snippets of conversation amongst the girls, and Cindy stood near them, widening her eyes. Until today, she'd never believed in magic. Her father was right. There truly was magic in the world. Cindy was near speechless. "Right, ladies, give those 2 some straw and I'll sort the carriage," Martha said, rubbing her palms together as she disappeared somewhere around the corner. Cindy's heart pounded in her chest as she tried to make sense of everything that had happened tonight. When Martha returned, Cindy was stroking the horses, thinking of what the crazy but kind prostitute could possibly be planning. The 3rd man turned into a handsome coachman who bowed toward her. The girls ran to Martha, helping her pull an old wooden cart filled with rubbish and pieces of old furniture. Cindy was just about to ask Martha what she wanted to do with it, when a bright yellow light blinded her. There was a loud bang, and then a burning smell wafted around. Cindy coughed a few times, clearing her lungs, and when she looked up, the cart was gone, and in its place was a stylish white carriage with 2 white horses in the lead. The coachman sat in front, holding a whip in his hand. All the girls looked on, impressed, completely awestruck, walking around and admiring it. Cindy was utterly shocked, but stopped questioning anything else at that point. She was going to the ball, and nothing else mattered. "Go on, girl, jump in and try to have a good time. You have until midnight, and then all the magic will disappear. Oh, and don't sleep with anyone while drunk." Martha winked, looking proud of her accomplishments. Seconds later, Cindy hugged her, trying not to cry at the same time. She squeezed all the other girls too, thanking them, and saying that she would never forget everything they'd done for her. She was so grateful that she'd bumped into Martha in the forest. "Right, go, go, otherwise you'll miss your prince," Martha kept saying, pushing her toward the carriage. The girls wished her good luck, and she leaned out of the window and waved to them as the horses pulled the carriage forward. Cindy sat back and tried to relax into the plush, white, cushioned seat, wondering if her luck had finally turned. The journey to the castle took a while, and Cindy had no idea how the beggars-turned-horses knew the way. She began thinking that magic was most likely guiding them, and told herself to stop worrying. Finally, the carriage pulled to a halt in front of the royal castle. Cindy remained inside for a few minutes, trying to take it all in, and wondering if this was such a good idea after all. She didn't want to be forced into a loveless marriage, but she was willing to sacrifice herself to save the estate. Then a very handsome guard opened the door, smiling at her. He was dressed in a smart white uniform, and when she stepped out, he bowed in front of her. Carriages were still arriving, and Cindy realized she wasn't as late as she thought. She could hear the orchestra playing inside, and gazed up at the enormous castle stretched out before her. It looked magnificent in the moonlight. Cindy was attempting to relax as she followed other ladies and gentlemen into the castle. When she walked inside the ballroom, what she saw was absolutely breathtaking, better than she could have ever imagined. She wondered why she'd never truly been interested in these sorts of parties before. There were tables decorated in black and white table coverings, with intricately etched silver and gold lining, and elegant candle centerpieces. An elaborate chandelier accented the entire ballroom, giving it a soft, enchanting glow. She noticed several couples dancing, but there were quite a few single ladies spread throughout the vast room. Some were dancing, while others were drinking and eating. As she looked around, she began to recognize a lot of people from town. She didn't care if her stepmother spotted her, but she wasn't planning to hide away. She had no idea if Ida would recognize her wearing such a beautiful gown fit for a princess, but for now she wanted to avoid any sort of confrontation. Soon she spotted a group of ladies on the other side of the room, surrounding someone who was engrossed in deep conversation. Cindy's interest was piqued, and she decided to head over there to see what all the fuss was about. She noticed a few men were staring at her with interest and smiling as she walked by. For now, she attempted to ignore their inviting stares, as heat rose in the pit of her stomach, though she was happy she was being noticed. It seemed a crowd of ladies were surrounding Prince Eric. Cindy was quite tall, but she had to wait several minutes in order to make her way to the front. There she saw a man around her height who wore a gold uniform with royal symbols. Cindy recognized Prince Eric from the posters around town, and she had to admit that he was quite handsome. He had short brown hair, high cheekbones, and bright hazel eyes. "I don't know, ladies. It's hard to decide," the prince said. "There are so many of you here." Cindy was amazed by how many ladies were attempting to get his attention. Most of them were smiling, giggling, and waving at him. 2 beautiful blondes were standing on either side of him, running their hands over his arm. "I must say that my good looks could easily overshadow each one of you here. I don't want to sound too vain, but I'm just too handsome, and my wife must be beyond beautiful." Cindy frowned, thinking that Eric sounded exactly just as he'd said. Vain. As she stood there, quite taken aback, she could hear a lot of young ladies sighing loudly. Some were elbowing each other, attempting to get closer to him. It was pathetic. She had to maintain her composure to keep from rolling her eyes. She needed to get out of here. The prince was an instant disappointment. "Yes, he's right. There isn't anyone here better looking than him," a girl on Cindy's right admitted, staring at Prince Eric as if she were about to faint. "I wish he would choose me to dance with him," another girl sighed. Cindy had heard enough, and it was then when she realized that Eric hadn't even noticed her standing in front. His arrogant attitude didn't appeal to Cindy at all. There was no possible way she could marry someone so self-centered, not even to save her father's estate. She'd have to find another way. She should have known that this was never going to work. "My lord, look around. All these beautiful ladies here expect you to choose at least one of them to dance with you. Remember what your father said. He wants you to find a wife by the end of the night." A shorter man, dressed in a blue uniform, was talking to Eric, reminding him of his responsibilities. Suddenly, two women pushed their way to the front, and Cindy's heart leapt to her throat when she realized they were her stepsisters. "I'll dance on my own if I have to, Duncan. There isn't anyone here worthy of my attention. Maybe later I'll choose a woman who won't steal all my glory." Cindy overheard Eric responding to the man who appeared to be his advisor. She needed to disappear fast, knowing Teresa and Susan would cause a scene if they recognized her. She had no intention of listening to the prince any longer. She thought his arrogance was appalling. She proceeded to walk toward the refreshment table, wondering if she'd made a mistake by coming to the ball tonight. After her affair with the highwayman, her heart had been broken for a long time. She wasn't ready to fall in love again. She wasn't certain if she believed in it at all. Cindy drank some champagne, thinking that perhaps she might at least enjoy getting drunk. The champagne tasted heavenly, and after a few generous sips, she felt a bit more open to meeting other men who were arriving at the castle tonight. She turned around and saw Charles from across the room. He was waving his hand at Red, and it seemed as if they were fighting about something. Many of the guests had stopped dancing and were staring at them. Moments later, she saw Charles shake his head and walk away, leaving Red alone, looking completely miserable. It seemed as if their reunion was only temporary, as it had been each and every time they decided to give their relationship another chance. She decided to head to the other side of the room, but then she saw her stepmother walking toward her, and Cindy panicked. She turned around abruptly with the intention of running, but instead she walked straight into someone. She didn't want to run. She'd only just arrived at the ball and didn't want her stepmother spoiling her mood. That someone she'd bumped into had a defined, muscular chest. Cindy swallowed hard and raised her eyes, meeting the gaze of a man who had the most mesmerizing dark eyes she had ever seen. Her heart jumped in her chest, and slow waves of what felt like electricity zoomed through her body, straight down to her core. She gasped, realizing that the man was much older than her, but he was incredibly handsome, with longish black hair and a wide, chiseled jaw. Dressed in a sharp black suit, he outshined any other man at the ball. All of a sudden, Cindy experienced tingles of heat between her thighs, and she instantly became aroused. He was taller than her, and something gleamed in his eyes, perhaps surprise, astonishment, or even admiration. She wasn't certain, but she could feel it as a blush rose to her cheeks, knowing they were most likely beet red. "Oh, sorry, I didn't see you. I was just—" "It's perfectly all right. Nothing to be sorry about. On the contrary, I'm happy to have bumped into such a beautiful creature. I feel incredibly fortunate," the stranger responded and smiled brightly. Another shot of unexpected desire jolted through her core. Cindy was surprised and overwhelmed with intense feelings she'd never in her life experienced. She'd only felt like that with Tom, but certainly not to this extreme. This was something more primal, a sexual need, an unexpected craving for the man standing before her. She also remembered how she'd felt when she was around Lieutenant Stanton, but this man was older. She told herself to gather her wits about her, but she couldn't stop staring at him. All she could think of was that she wanted to be ravaged by him, to have his hands and mouth touching every part of her body. No, what the hell was wrong with her? Just a moment ago, she was running away from her stepmother, still thinking of other men in the ballroom. And now she couldn't stop staring at a strange man. A gorgeous man, but a stranger nonetheless. She had no idea what to do with herself. She needed to disappear, but her legs seemed to be chained to the floor. She couldn't move. "Thank you. My name is Cindy," she blurted out, wondering what the hell had gotten into her. But his eyes flickered with even more lust than before. Unexpectedly, the stranger took her hand and lowered his head, kissing it ever so gently. A shudder of excitement shot through her again, and she gasped. There was something terribly wrong happening to her. She had never felt so overwhelmed with desire before. Was he dousing her with some sort of strange magic? "It's a pleasure to meet you, Cindy. Is it short for Cinderella?" She nodded, shocked that the man's voice sounded so erotic and sensual. She could listen to him speak all night. "My name is Caspian, and I'm the father of Prince Eric. Please, allow me to show you around. If I had known such a stunning woman would decide to show up at the ball, I would have welcomed you at the door myself." Cindy smiled, parting her lips. She was a little surprised that the prince's father, the king, had actually taken an interest in her. She didn't care about Eric at all. She thought he was narcissistic and arrogant anyway. The king, on the other hand, was well-mannered and made her feel things she'd never felt in her life. Her heart was beating frantically in her chest, which wasn't normal. She'd never thought in a million years that King Caspian would be so incredibly good-looking. She'd always thought of him as a decrepit, balding old man. Not that she'd seen him, of course, but her mind had a silly way of imagining things. She bowed before him, forgetting about her stepmother and the estate for now. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Your Highness," she said. "No, please, call me Caspian. I hate all of the formalities," he said with a gesture of his hand. "Tonight's orchestra is remarkable. Would you like to dance with me?" She felt as if she were in a fog, unable to fully control her body. The king was asking her to dance. She couldn't speak, so she nodded instead. Moments later, they joined other couples on the dance floor. The king brought one arm around her waist, and her entire body seared with an all-encompassing heat. The fire in her core was pulsing with every beat of her heart. His touch was like a flame, igniting a passion inside of her, something she'd only ever dreamed of. "Stunning. You're absolutely stunning, Cindy, and I can't believe our paths haven't crossed before," he said to her, moving his dark gaze down to her lips. Other couples were dancing around them, and at some point Cindy noticed Prince Eric. He was moving around the dance floor, pretending he was holding someone by his side. Some of the guests were laughing at him, but other ladies were staring at him, still mesmerized. "Thank you. I wasn't certain if I would be able to make it," she said, as naughty images flashed in front of her eyes. She was seeing King Caspian pushing her on the bed, then spreading her legs and staring at her nakedness with a mischievous grin. Her thoughts were making her weak. "I'm so delighted you're here. In a few minutes, I'm going to take you upstairs so we can get to know each other a bit better. I believe we have a lot in common, my dear. Trust me when I tell you how much I desire you, Cinderella. More than I've ever desired any other woman in my entire existence."